The train hissed like an angry serpent as it crawled through the white silence of the mountains, its black iron lungs coughing smoke into the pale sky. Clara Whitmore pressed her gloved hands against the cold glass and watched the endless snowfields slide past, her heart thudding like a frightened bird in a cage. She was 22 years old, with eyes too soft for the world she'd been forced into and dreams too fragile for the letters. She'd written letters, 23 of them. 23 hopeful men who wanted a mail-order bride, and 23 replies that had come back polite, hesitant, or cruel, too thin, too quiet, too poor, too plain. She had folded each rejection carefully, smoothing the paper so it would not wrinkle. As though neatness could hide humiliation, her stepmother had laughed when the last letter arrived. "No one wants a girl who can't bring land or dowry," she'd said. Her voice like vinegar poured over wounds. "You'll end up scrubbing floors till your bones break." So Clara had written again, one final letter to a name she barely recognized. Elias Mercer, Black Pine Mountain Territory. He had replied with only one line: "Come before winter closes the past. No compliments, no promises, no warmth. Just an instruction." And so she was on the train now, leaving behind the town that had never loved her, traveling toward a man rumored to be half wild, living in a cabin carved from the bones of a mountain. The conductor stared when she handed him her ticket. "You sure about this, miss?" he asked quietly. "That territory ain't kind." Clara swallowed her fear and nodded. "Neither is home." When Clara arrived at the frontier post, no one came to meet her. The wind screamed through broken fence posts. Dogs barked from somewhere unseen. Men in rough coats stared openly at her as if she were a curiosity hauled in from a circus wagon. "You the male bride?" one of them asked. She nodded. "For who?" "Elias Mercer." The man whistled. "Lo, that ghost, ain't seen him in months." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Clara's cheeks burned, but she stood straight. She had known humiliation before. She would survive another. Night fell before Elias came. He rode in without a word, tall and broad in the saddle, snow clinging to his coat like frost clinging to a cliff. His beard was dark, his eyes colder than winter steel, and his silence heavier than any insult. He dismounted slowly and looked at her. Not with hunger, not with kindness. With measurement. "You're smaller than I expected," he said. Her throat tightened. "I can work." He nodded once. "Good." That was all. No greeting, no smile, no welcome. Just a bargain spoken into the cold air. The townsfolk whispered behind them. "She won't last. He's buried 2 wives already. Poor thing don't know what she's walking into." Clara heard every word, but she climbed onto his spare horse anyway, because she had nowhere else to go. The climb to Black Pine Mountain took 2 days, 2 days of ice biting through her boots, of silence thick as snow drifts, of Elias speaking only when necessary. He showed her how to tie the mule, how to step over frozen streams, how to keep her scarf wrapped tight. He never asked about her past. He never spoke of his. But sometimes at night, Clara saw him staring into the fire with grief so deep it looked like a wound that had never closed. The cabin stood alone on a cliff ridge, pine trees bending like praying hands around it. Smoke curled from the chimney, and wolves howled somewhere distant. Inside, the cabin was clean, neat. Lonely, 2 graves stood behind it. Clara froze when she saw them. Elias said quietly, "Fever took them, winter before last." She bowed her head. For the first time, his voice softened. "You can leave come spring if you want. I won't stop you." She looked at the graves, the empty cabin, the man whose loneliness echoed like wind in a canyon. "I'll stay," she whispered. Elias nodded, but his eyes searched her face, as if testing whether she understood the weight of that promise. Later that night, as snow fell thick and silent, he stood in the doorway, shadowed by lamplight. His voice was rough. "I need sons to help keep this land alive." He paused, then asked the words that would change her life. "Will you give me sons?" Clara's heart pounded. She thought of rejection, of cold streets, of a life without belonging, and she answered softly, trembling but brave, "If you give me a home." Elias looked at her for a long time. Then he closed the door against the storm. Life on Black Pine Mountain was harder than Clara had imagined. She learned to split wood until her palms blistered. She learned to trap rabbits, to mend fences, to bake bread with flour stretched thin. Elias never praised her, but he watched quietly, fixing what she broke without complaint. The first time she fell into the snowdrift, sobbing from exhaustion, he lifted her gently as if she weighed nothing. "You don't have to prove anything," he said. "I do," she whispered. To myself, slowly. He began teaching her the land, which berries would kill, which herbs healed fever, where the river thawed first, sometimes when the fire burned low. Clara told him stories of her childhood, of music she had loved, of dreams she'd buried. He listened like a starving man hearing song after years of silence, and one night, he spoke of his wives, not as ghosts, but as memories. They laughed a lot, he said. Cabin used to be loud. Clara reached across the table and took his hand. He didn't pull away. Spring came late, and danger came sooner. Wolves circled the cabin one night, their howls slicing the dark. Elias went out with his rifle, and Clara followed with trembling courage, holding the lantern high. The wolves retreated, but Elias slipped on the ice and fell, cutting his leg badly. Clara dragged him inside and stitched the wound with shaking hands, remembering scraps of medicine her mother had taught her. For 3 days, he could not walk. For 3 days, Clara worked alone feeding animals, hauling water, chopping wood. On the 4th day, he watched her through the window as she lifted a heavy log. Face streaked with sweat and soot. Something in his expression changed. That night, he said quietly, "You're stronger than anyone who wrote you off." Clara laughed softly. "They never saw me try." He touched her cheek, hesitant, reverent. "Not as a bargain, not as duty. As hope. And when he asked again, "Will you give me sons?" his voice carried something new. Not command. Love. She leaned into him and whispered, "Yes." Months passed. Seeds were planted. Snow melted. Laughter returned to the cabin. Clara found wildflowers growing between rocks and brought them home in jars. Elias carved her a cradle from cedar wood. The 2 graves were cleaned, ringed with blossoms. No longer lonely but remembered. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of gold over Black Pine Mountain, Clara placed Elias's rough hand on her belly. His breath caught. She smiled through tears. "You're going to be a father." For a long moment, the mountain man who feared nothing trembled like a boy. He knelt in the dirt and wept, not for loss, not for regret, for the miracle he never thought would return. Clara wrapped her arms around him, whispering, "You gave me a home. I gave you hope. Together, we made a future." And as the wind carried their laughter down into the valley where no one had wanted her, the mountain stood silent witness to a truth stronger than rejection. Sometimes the woman no one chooses becomes the heart of a man who never believed he deserved love again.